This is Morning Coffee with your host Dave Casty. This is the kind of the grand finale of my solar setup here. I finally got my Renogy battery. So it's a 12 volt 200 amp hour battery, which is supposed to give you like 20 hours worth of juice. If you do the math, 12 volts times 200 gives you 2400, right? Watt hours. But really, because it's a lead acid battery, even though it's a AGM, which is a gel battery, you still have to divide or times that by 50%, and then so that really only gives you like 1200 watt hours, which is more than enough for my setup. I have two 200 watt solar panels on the roof. Yeah, so let's get cooking here. Yeah, I don't know actually if you can see the battery or not. Yeah, you should be able to. Let me just quickly, yeah, there's the battery right there. So there we go. You can see everything. So the first thing you're supposed to do, I think, so with the Rich Solar kit comes with these two battery to charge controller cables. So I'm gonna do that first. I think that's the order of sequence you're supposed to hook up these cables first. So I'm gonna just cut the cable here. And then really, honestly, you should cut these to length if you can. I'm not gonna do that for the sake of demonstration and just showing you how you should set this up. I think you always want to start with the negative cable, and I think you want to, it might not matter, but I think you want to start with the battery first. So I'm going to take this battery cable, screw this in here. I got the socket for this, and you want to tighten that as much as you can. So I'm gonna, yeah. Oops, I think I have it in reverse. Hold on 1 second. There we go. You want to tighten that as much as you can. There we go. It's pretty tight. Put this into the charge controller. That's where it says battery. So the negative is going to be on the right side here. So the beauty of Rich Solar is they already cut and wire strip these cables, and actually this is like a perfect cable. I don't even have to really twist it or anything to get it straight and narrow. So actually I'm making it worse. Somehow I'm making it worse, but yeah. You want to get all the little strands of wire tightly wound together, and then what you're going to do is you're going to stick it into where it says negative here, and then you're going to force that up in there as high as possible. And then I'm going to take my my Phillips head screwdriver. I'm just going to hold that in place. Hold it up, and then I'm just going to tighten where it says negative battery. There we go. Alright. So that's that piece. Then I'm going to take my positive cable. So positive is going to go to the positive of the battery on the charge controller. Same thing, you want to make this so it's flush, right? So there's kind of like two ends to these terminals. One's more that would be more flat and flush to the battery, so you just want to make sure it's on that side, so right there. And then I have these. So you have the washer, and then the tightening washer, which should sit above the washer itself. And so you want the contact to be flush with the terminal of the battery. And you really want that to be as tight as possible. Let me use my socket wrench. Tighten that until it doesn't go any further. There we go. Alright. Alright, for some reason that's not coming out. Okay. Come on. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to take the positive and stick it into where it says battery and then positive. And we're going to do the same thing. Oops, one of the strands went rogue on me. I'm going to twist this up to ensure the maximum transfer of power and efficiency. I want to make sure all the strands get put in there. I should have a hard time with this one. Alright, twist that up. There we go. Stick that up into there. Push up as much as possible. There we go. And then I'm going to take my screwdriver and tighten it. There we go, and look at that. The charge controller came right on. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see that, says it reads 13 volts. So actually, let me just take this off real quick. As you can see there, it says 13 volts, so that's great. Actually, I think that, yeah, that's good. So 13 volts is good. I think you want it, you never want it to drop like below 12 volts. So yeah, the charge controller instantly came on as soon as you hooked up the battery to it. So that's great, that's a good sign. I am seeing like a red light there. I don't know if that's a bad sign. I have to read more on the manual. I don't know if that's supposed to be green or not, but I can check that. As you can see here, so that's where the positive and negative 1 and 2. So the red obviously is positive, going into the positive of the battery, and then negative of the charge controller going into the negative of the battery. Right there. There we are. Alright, great. So that's done. Alright, so real quick, yeah, that red indicator on the battery light is actually normal. I think that's just the default color. I don't think, it just says here simply in the manual that, I don't know if you can see this, but battery indicator steady on means battery, normal battery voltage. So yeah, I think we're good to go. If there was an error, there is a separate error indicator right here, this little button at the bottom, or this little light, LED light at the bottom. That would be either steady on or flashing, but that's currently off. So I think we're good to go, and it's also reading a steady 13 volts. So yeah, I think the battery hookup is okay. So the next step, the next sequence is to hook up the solar panels. So I already have the negative cable hooked up into the charge controller, going into the negative where it says solar here. It also reads PV negative at the bottom there of the terminal. And then these cables are running, it's going behind this board here and then running all the way up to the roof of the shed and hooked up to the solar panels currently. So now I'm going to do the positive one. I'm just going to stick this into where it reads positive, the charge controller. Oops, it looks like the negative one's coming out. That's not good. I must have not tightened that one. In any case, you want to hold that up in there and then tighten as much as you can. much as possible. All right. Here we are. So this is very exciting. So I finally got everything hooked up. As you can see, the solar LED light is blinking. It's blinking slowly, but it is definitely producing energy. I don't know. This all of a sudden just started to kick in. I don't know if it's because the sun, it's a little cloudy today, but the sun is glaring through those clouds, so maybe this is finally registering the sun. It is about like 10:30 a.m. here on the East Coast, Northeast. I live in New Jersey, or I was kind of finagling the cables that are going into the PV connectors on the charge controller. And it just all of a sudden, this is just very exciting. This just started kicking in, and so this whole screen is this is very exciting to me. Some of you might not find it as exciting as I am, but so this screen shows you pretty much everything you need to know. So you got, if you can see that little sun icon here, let me quickly just turn on the light here and then you can see this better. All right, hopefully you can see this a little better, but it might be hard to make out. Yeah, so you can see that little sun icon there. Yeah, see the sun icon next to the solar. That basically means it's running on daytime, which means it's detecting the sun. And then you can see that little arrow going into the battery icon and slowly progressing forward, which means that it's charging the battery. Sorry, one of my boxes just fell. So yeah, so that arrow is going into the battery, which means it's charging the battery. The light bulb is actually for if you have any loads or anything directly hooked up to the charge controller, like any smaller DC loads, like lights, like LED lights or something. I don't, and typically no one really uses that. So yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And then you could see that the battery went from like 14 voltage to 14.4, so that means it's charging the battery even more. So the voltage is going up, which is a good sign. And then you can also see the battery icon has almost full bars, which means it's almost completely charged. When this was shipped to me, this battery right here, this Renogy 12 volt 200 amp hour, this thing is massive. It's an AGM battery, which means it's using like the gel chemicals versus the typical what you would normally get with an acid lab battery, which is more leak proof, which is great. This battery just weighs a ton. It weighs 130 pounds, which I guess doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when it's compact into this one container, this one kind of compact container, it's like almost impossible to deal with. I had to move this with a hand truck just to get it over here. Originally I was gonna have this battery sit on this shelf, and then I had my charge controller and my inverter board up here, but it was so heavy that it was like impossible to get it up on here. Plus I'm not even sure that this shelf could hold that kind of weight. So I just kept the battery down here, moved everything, my charge controller, my inverter, my power surge, my outlets and everything, and just moved the entire board down closer to the floor so I can just rest the battery on the floor. You wouldn't believe I can't believe, I mean, I think this is why people get 100 amp 12 volt batteries, just because the weight, especially if you're doing lead acid, the weight is like half. and they're a lot, a lot easier to manage and move around. And then you can just connect those in parallel and series depending on what you're doing. Now I get that. But in any case, yeah, it looks like everything is working. Yeah, so real quick, I have the temperature connector in the charge controller, and then this comes with a 3M sticker that I can just plug directly on the battery, and I think you can essentially stick it. I'm gonna stick it next to the negative of the negative terminal of the battery, and then I don't know if there's some kind of, so that's the voltage. So 43.8 voltage I think is what's coming in from solar, so that's not bad. 2.5 amps, 14.3 amps volts overall in the battery, and then so no DC load, so nothing going into the load, and then 30, I don't know if that's the battery temperature, I would assume so. So it says 30, let me just show you real quick. So it's saying 30 degrees Celsius, so I'm assuming that's, what else would it be reading? Like, I'm assuming that's the battery temperature. So that seems like a good temperature for the battery. And then it's claiming 15 for the load. So something must be drawing a little bit of power. Maybe it's the charge controller itself. But yeah, there it is, and there's the overall. And then there's a little battery icon. You probably can't even make it out. That tells you the battery type right here, yeah. So it says SLD, which means sealed, which stands for sealed lead acid. So I think that's the default, and I think that's correct. Although this one is saying that it's AGM, but I don't know if it's truly like. There's also the option for gel, but I'm just going to leave it at sealed lead acid for now. I don't even know how to go and change it. Maybe you have to connect the Bluetooth app on your phone and the connector here on the charge controller to even be able to change the battery type. That will work. All right, so next up will be the inverter. All right, so now we're gonna connect the inverter. And the best way to do that is you don't want any charge. It's kind of sad. I have to disconnect the, so you want to disconnect the solar. So you don't need to do both of these cables going into the charge controller. Really, you can get away with just doing one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and really you want to do, obviously you want to do the positive one to kind of connect the circuit and it from producing any power, because that could be dangerous to be working on these components. So I'm going to unplug. Stuck in there. So yeah, and to confirm that it disconnected the solar, it went from daytime to nighttime, which means it's not detecting any sun. So that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that cable right there. So now we should be okay to connect the inverter. So right now we have, I'm just going to put these gloves on just in case. These are rubber gloves. This is probably unnecessary. Just gonna be on the safe side here. I'm gonna go ahead and undo the bolts that are connected the charge controller to the battery. Leave bolt right there. Undo. So I think you always want to start with the negative. I'm going to start there. Undo the bolt, the negative, the cable that's going from the battery to the charge controller, and then we'll connect the inverter. Now there are other ways to do this where you don't have to connect both of the terminals directly to the battery. You can get like what they call terminal blocks, and then connect everything to the terminal block, and then the terminal block goes to the battery. But considering we're only connecting like 2 of these components, we could get away with doing it this way. So this is the negative of the inverter going to the negative terminal on the battery, and then I want to make sure these 2 things are flush. You actually don't want a washer in between these 2. You want them to be both flush against each other and then flush against the terminal of the battery itself. And then I'm going to screw this in. And then I'm going to lock it down in the battery using my wrench. I'm going to reverse this so that it goes back to tighten. Alright. There we go. Tighten as much as I can. Alright. So there we go. So now we got the negative cable going from the charge controller and the negative of the inverter going into the battery. So those are stacked on top of each other and as flush as possible. So now we're going to do the same with the positive. And I've heard you might get a spark here. Let's see. No, a spark. Okay, that's fine, I guess. Then also, so you want to stack both of these up. So the positive terminal and from the charge controller and the positive terminal of the inverter. So let's put those together, get them as flush as possible, and screw those in. And then, as I mentioned, we have this beautiful 200 amp fuse. That's an install gear 200 amp fuse. And I think that's typically used for like car audio setups. It acts as like a fuse for audio. Typically with audio you would have like a separate battery, and then the battery would be going into the amplifier, and that would be going in between the separate battery in the car and the amplifier. But if it works for many applications, it will work for this one. So I got both of those terminal blocks connected. They're both flush. I have this fuse mounted to the board. Looks like the charge controller came back on, so that's a good sign. I gotta tighten this as much as possible so that tells me this thing really likes to get stuck. It tells me that everything is working. So the only last step I think is to, wow, I can't believe I'm on this last step. The last step is to plug back in the positive terminal coming, or the cable coming from the solar panels into the connector here on the charge controller. And I'm just going to go ahead and twist that cable. This honestly could probably be sliced a little better, and maybe I will do that a little later. That might be why it was having difficulties registering this before. But yeah, I made sure that's all the way up into the connector here. And then yeah, instantly the solar started blinking, so I know that's correct. That looks right. I'm gonna tighten that as much as possible and hold it up. And the solar light is still going off, so that means it's charging. It's producing energy and it's charging the battery. It looks like everything's functioning. So the only other true test is to let me grab my camera here and then just show you. So the only other true test is to actually, do I have something that I can plug in? Actually, yeah, these guys are already plugged in. So let me, let's give this a run. Here we go. So I'm just gonna turn on the inverter. There we go, we got lights. It's registering voltage, it's very cool. It's also telling you how much it's drawing, I think. So it actually, I think just the inverter itself tells you, and actually I think I read this about its Amazon reviews, that this particular inverter, it's good. It's a 3000 watt pure sine inverter, so it's a very good inverter, but I heard it does draw, some power on even when it's on standby or even idle. The fact that it turned blue, there's no red light, means it's fully functional. We are producing solar, which is going into the battery. The inverter is connected to the battery, and that is simply converting DC to AC. And then I guess the next step is to just turn on the power surge. There we go, we have light on the power surge. And then, look at this. The two Ryobi battery chargers have lit up. So wow, I can't believe this. This is amazing. This is all working. So this is my very humble solar kit. Took me a while to get everything together. This might seem like, it is a very simple setup, but it took me a while just to get all the components, get them all connected. But yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful day. The sun is somewhat out today. It's a little cloudy. But yeah, all right, so the next step, so just the fact that those lights came on the Ryobi battery chargers, these 18 volt battery chargers, is a great sign. I'm assuming it's working, but let's go ahead and plug in this 18 volt battery from this wireless drill here and truly test it out. Wow, this is awesome. Can't believe this. This is amazing. So let's plug this in, see how it goes. There we are. So we have a green light, and the green light is blinking, which indicates that it is charging this 18 volt battery. Wow, I'm just astonished. So the next step is I have a 40 volt lithium battery for my my electric lawnmower here, so I'll bring that charger out and then test that. Wow, this is I'm actually kind of speechless. This is amazing. So here we are. Here's just the breakdown. There's 2 cables here running up to the roof, hooked up to the 2 solar panels that's coming down and connect. I have a lot of additional slack for those solar extension cables. That might be the one thing where I don't kind of fit it to size or cut it to what's needed, because you never know if you change your setup if you need a longer cables if you rearrange things. But the everything else though should be cut to size to get the maximum efficiency, so I might work on that. Cut everything else to size, but yeah, I'll do that later. And then yeah, so those cables are from the solar are going into the charge controller, positive and negative. And then from the charge controller, well, the first thing that that you're supposed to connect to the charge controller is the battery, and then and then that will actually turn the charge controller on. And then yeah, and then from the battery, the positive and negative, you have the charge controller connectors and cables and the inverter cables, as you can see here. Actually, I gotta make sure that I have the inverter cables all the way tightly bolted on there. I know I do with the negative one, but I'm not sure about the positive one, so I'll check on that. And then yeah, I actually just have one more fuse that I want to do. So this is going to be the A&L inline fuse, 40 amp fuse. That's going to go in between the charge controller and the battery cable. So, and I think these are bolt-ons. So so these, you would actually want two terminals to go on that connect in onto here. That would go in between, like I mentioned, the charge controller cable and the battery itself. So you would do the positive. You always fuse the positive. Yeah, and that's essentially it. Let me just go outside real quick and just show you the roof. So here we are. This is my shed. I built this shed last year. This was before I was even knew I wanted to build like my own little solar system. So there, the 2 beautiful solar panels, 200 watts each. There's the sun. It's kind of a cloudy day, but it's still registering, so that's a great sign. Yeah, so I built this shed over a year ago, I think. Yeah, not even knowing that I was gonna one day do my own DIY solar system. And then, so basically the idea is that this solar system, I'll eventually maybe expand it and grow it to like 800 watts, maybe even get up to 1200 watts. And then it will power all my tools, lights and stuff in the shed. And then the idea is I have a Hyundai EV, a Hyundai Ioniq EV. And then if I get it up to like 1.2 constant 1.2 kilowatt hours, right, with this pretty large battery, I might even be able to charge my car with this system. But like that takes 1.3 kilowatt hours. So yeah, I mean, even though it's a slow charger, it's still drawing a lot of power. But yeah, if I feel like I have enough power sufficient to charge my car, I might even give that a go. I could probably even do it now, but that would rapidly drain this battery, and I would just have to be careful that it doesn't, it would work now. And that uses, so I have a 15 amp between everything. And that would work right now. But like I said, it would drain this battery really quickly. And then you just got to keep on this eye on the battery. So you don't want it to drain below 12 volts. Otherwise that could start damaging the battery. And then, you know, you have this here, which tells you how many volts, and then also tells you the charge level, which is great. So yeah, that's basically it. Alright, so real quickly, just as another test to prove that this system is working, not that all these lights wouldn't be an indicator enough to prove that it's working, but I have this, so this is kind of what I've been using to film this series, this kind of LED lamp, and then I've been putting my phone in this holder here. So this actually uses USB to power the LED light. So the cool feature of this power strip that I got is that it uses USB. So I'm just going to plug that into USB, and then watch this. So I'm going to turn on this light with this little switch here, and voila, look at that. So we have power, we have light from the sun producing electricity, and then making this LED light turn on light to light. It's a beautiful thing. Alright, so the last bit here is that I have this BT1 controller. Basically it's a Bluetooth controller that allows you to hook up an app on your smartphone to the charge controller remotely, so you don't have to keep coming back to wherever your charge controller is, and then you can monitor it that way. So that was the BT1. And then the BT1 comes with this little like network jack here, and that'll just plug right into the bottom of this guy here. And there we go. So I got that plugged in. Still producing solar, still the battery is good. Everything looks normal here, no error lights there. And then this should have, I don't see a link light, so I don't know. Maybe the link light only comes on when you hook up your smartphone app to it, but I'll give that a go next. So I'm looking at the manual that came with this BT1 Bluetooth adapter, and there's really limited instructions. Obviously the wiring diagram, you just simply plug it into this, what they're calling an RST32 connector, which is just like kind of like a network jack. It's a Ethernet cable, they're calling it. And then really no installation instructions other than it says to download Bluetooth app, and look how generic this name is. Search for on Google Play or the App Store Solar app, and then use this administrator password. So that's it. That's all there is. And then I got, once I have that connected that to my smartphone, this link light will come up. So I'm gonna give that a go. So yeah, real quick, I have all three of my Ryobi battery chargers. So this is my big 40 volt battery. This is what I use for my electric lawnmower. This guy right here, this bad boy, this 40 volt lithium Ryobi, which works great. These ones, this bigger one here, still 18 volt, but bigger capacity, has a little more amp hours, 3 amp hours. I'm not actually sure what the amp hours are, probably half of that, like 1.5 or something. In any case, this is what I use for like my weed whacker, my leaf blower, my power tools, my drill. I have a circular saw. I'm like all in on Ryobi products. I think they work well. The only thing I don't think works great is I got this nailer, which is like an electric nail gun. It's more like a a braider. I'm not sure what they call it. It works okay, but I had it malfunction a few times. I had to take it into Home Depot to get it repaired. But this is all very cool. So everything is working. Power from the sun going into this battery. And then this battery is charging these little batteries. So batteries charging batteries. What a world we live in. This is amazing. So yeah, as you can see, actually that's fully charged now. This one's fully charged, and then this one is still charging. So yeah, batteries charging batteries. Awesome. Okay, so real quick, I just want to correct something I said earlier. This AGM, I said it was like a gel battery. Although AGMs, which stands for absorbed glass mat, have similar properties and attributes. There's some parallels to be drawn between an AGM and a gel. I think consistently it's more similar to a sealed, and technically an AGM is a sealed acid lead battery. So I think when you're configuring your charge controller and you're selecting the battery type, these charge controllers typically will pick sealed as the default. And I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna keep it at sealed, but you should really honestly check the manual that came with your battery and check its properties, like its voltage properties, on what they call float, boost. Float is kind of like it's standby. When it's like higher than when it's at like 14 voltage, it's considered more boost range. But just check those properties, because those properties will be set on the charge controller itself. And so it has certain things like overcharge, cutoff, and other things too, and it'll give you like a low voltage warning. So like when it reaches like 12 volts and those kind of things. So just, check your manual, make sure it matches up with the matrix on the charge controller. On this particular charge controller, I have it hooked up to that Bluetooth unit up here. And then on the app itself, there's like 4 or 5 options for battery types. There's SLD, which is sealed, then you have your gel, then obviously you have your lithium, and then you have your flood batteries. So like I mentioned, the sealed I think is like the closest one that I can come up with. But if you feel like that is a little off, you can there's a custom option. You can select custom battery type and then put in your own voltage properties, and then get it to as close to spec as what's recommended from the battery manual. So yeah, I would advise you to do that. So I just wanted to correct myself from an earlier statement. I said AGM was gel. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I said gel, but it's not gel. It's actually absorbed glass mat. So there you have it. Okay, real quick, I just wanted to show everyone something that I was kind of having trouble with. I mean, it's pretty simple, but putting these cables into the charge controller could prove to be difficult. And the reason I think I have difficulty is because maybe I didn't completely loosen the screws to accept the cables to begin with. But now I think I got it. So obviously the cables coming from the solar panels will go into PV photovoltaic plus and minus there. And the battery obviously goes into the plus and minus of the battery. But I just wanted to show everyone something real quick. So if I were to tighten this, you'll see there's a little bracket inside that hole that will close up. So I'm tightening the screw now. You should eventually see that little metal bracket inside? It's slowly collapsing and going inward. So now I'm going to loosen it again. And this is just a little tidbit. So before you actually insert the cable, you just want to make sure that metal bracket inside the hole there is completely open, right? So right now it's completely open, and now it's ready to accept the cable. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug my negative cable in. Hold on. All right. So yeah, here's my. Actually, technically, I think you're supposed to do it the other way around. Negative goes first, but in any case, so I have a negative cable here. I'm just gonna twist that a little more to get all the strands together. And then what I'll be doing is I'll insert it, now that that little metal bracket I was showing you inside the PV minus hole is fully open. I'm gonna just insert that into there. You see that? See? Completely open. There we go. Now I made full contact with it. And now I'm just gonna close that up by holding it down and then screwing it in. And there you go, voila. So now we know that they're fully inserted, and then that little metal bracket is fully collapsed on top of the exposed cable wire. Okay, so also what's interesting is that I must have not had the battery connected all the way in as well, because it shot up from being reading as 13.8 volts to reading as 14.4 volts here, despite, you know, it reading as full capacity. So something was off. I must have not had the battery cables inserted all the way. So that's a good sign. The solar cables should be in properly now as well. I'm getting the blink light on the solar panels, which means it's registering solar and it's producing power. And then also it went from nighttime to daytime, meaning that it's reading the solar panels and the circuit of the solar panels. So that's good. So let's go through. So this is a pretty good overview of everything. So this gives you obviously the solar power production going into the battery, and the battery is reading at 100% because we've got full bars on the battery. Battery charge is also reading at 14.4 volts, which might be close to what its maximum is in any case. And then also it's reading as boost versus float, which I think means it's charging right now, or it's nearing full capacity. So if I go through this panel here, so that means solar is registering right now at 44 volts, and let's see how many amp hours we get, and almost close to 1 amp. So basically you can times the voltage there by the amps, and that will kind of give you an idea. And actually this is reading higher than it was before. Right now we almost have peak sun. It's almost 12 p.m. here in the Northeast. So yeah, we should be almost getting like peak sun. I think peak sun happens around like 1 p.m. honestly, when the sun is directly overhead in center with its arch. So yeah, so that's good. So 44 volts, and this voltage can vary, and that's kind of why you have a charge controller to begin with, because it takes that varied voltage and then kind of makes it into usable power. It regulates that voltage. And then we got almost a whole amp. And then the battery's reading at 14.4 volts at full charge. Currently there is no draw right now. I don't have anything into the load, although I think the charge controller itself can take a little bit of a draw. And then 0 amp hours are going into the battery, and that might be just because the battery might already be at full charge, so it knows not to overcharge it. And then again, once the draw level, and then this is the temperature of the battery. And then E0 is basically, that means it's detecting no error codes right now, so everything is operating as normal. Alright, so that's it. That's the overview. Alright, so now I have the inverter turned on. And as soon as I turned on the inverter, it started producing more amps to the battery. And I guess that's just to prevent it, because the battery's at 100%. It's just, it kicked up the amperage because, you know, due to overload protection, it doesn't put more amps to the battery than what's necessary. I mean, to prevent it from overloading the battery, it curves the battery, because it jumped up from like 0.7 amps to almost 4 amps at. Oh, so the voltage, that's interesting. So wait, no, that's the voltage of the battery, sorry. I was gonna say, the voltage of the solar is 44, almost 45. This is called 45 at 4 amps. So, yeah, that's pretty good. So, what is that? So 45 times 4. Yeah, so 45 times 4, that's 180. So yeah, that's great. 180, so, well, not quite. So that's 180 watts, so not quite, it's not quite peak sun yet either. So if you can see, it's, what time is it? It's like a little over 9 a.m. I think here in the Northeast, so producing 180 watts with two 200 watt panels. So I just wanted to quickly show you, it seems like the more things that I have plugged in to the power strip. So right now I have this power washer. Obviously this power washer is on idle. If I were to crank this up, it would be drawing even more power. Right now I have a Renogy battery charger, 18 volt, being charged, and I have this LED light, which LED lights typically don't really draw much power. I should get something in here that would really just start drawing power. But in any case, as soon as I started plugging more things in, the higher the amperage went from this solar panel to that, going from the solar panel into the battery. So I always thought, so the charge controller is doing more than what I thought originally, which was to just regulate the voltage coming from the solar panel. But it seems to regulate the voltage and amperage that's going into the battery as well. And I think it does that because you don't want to, right now the battery's at 100% and you don't want to overload the battery, right? You don't want to put more power into the battery than what it can handle, right? You don't want to exceed, obviously you don't want to exceed 100%. So as soon as I started plugging things in, this amperage right here jumped from like 0.7, 0.9 to all the way up to 4 to like it's even going up even higher than that to like 6. So you would multiply that amperage by the voltage, and then that would give you the total watts. So we're going anywhere from like 180 watts to like well over 200 watts. And then I bet you, so the sun is producing some good power right now. It's about 10 a.m. here in the Northeast. But yeah, I bet if I plug more things in, something that would really just draw power from this sucker, then yeah, I bet you the amperage would go up even further. So it's quite cool. I mean, I guess it makes sense that it does that. But yeah, it's basically regulating all your components. Not only the solar panels and the voltage from the solar panels, but it's also regulating the voltage and the amperage that goes into the battery, which is quite smart. So really, yeah, your charge controller really is the brains of the whole setup and operation. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly show you. Again, just to reiterate the point of the amperage or the amps going up as I plug more things in. So I just plugged in my laptop here, my Surface. As you can see, there's a light. So it's charging, and as soon as I did that, as you can see, the amps jumped from like 6 to almost a consistent 7 amps. And then I think I'm still getting about 42 volts from the solar panels, which sometimes goes up to even like 45 volts. So 45 or 42 times 7, that's like in the 300 watt range. So that's really good. So I'm sure if I plugged even more things in, then, you know, a laptop won't really draw a whole lot of power. But even still, to the point that it's really cool that the charge controller just instantly jumps up, makes the amps jump up if you have more things plugged in. Because obviously we're producing quite a lot of sun right now. But you know that the amps will go down. Like, let me go ahead and test this. I'm gonna just turn off the power surge and let's see if the amps jump down. There we go. Look at that. The amps just immediately go down, because what's happening is that the battery is at 100%, and the charge controller is regulating that and doesn't want to exceed that 100% or overcharge the battery. So it instantly just drops the amperage that's going from the solar panel into the battery. Very cool stuff. I wasn't aware that charge controllers do that. Obviously I'm a novice at this, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are very familiar with solar systems. They're basically like, yeah, duh, of course it does that, or that's not quite right. But yeah, so I just turned the power surge on again, the power strip on, and then of course the amperage jumped up again. It didn't quite jump up as high as 7. Actually, the reason it didn't jump up as high as 7 is because I'll have to turn this light on again. There you go, turn this light on, draw more power, and there we have it. And now it's gonna reach almost 7 again. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. But even still, it's an awesome discovery on my part. Very cool stuff. Okay, as a true test of power being drawn from the inverter and the battery and this whole solar setup, as you can see, I actually have 2 power strips, one close to the inverter and the charge controller, and then one plugged into the second outlet of the inverter that's up here, and then this is actually going up to this light, this LED 360 light that I just bought for the shed, so that should illuminate the entire shed. LED lights don't generally, or typically draw a whole lot of power, although that's a pretty decent one. I have this LED light here, and then actually I'll plug in one of my Ryobis just as another test, just get a bunch of stuff in here. I'll do one of the bigger batteries, although I think this one's fully charged, but in any case. So that's charging right there, and then as a true test of draw power, power being drawn, and I have this Makita saw hooked up, so I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna run this guy. And then so the inverter just went off, so I think that drew more than what it could handle. So there we go. Confirmed that was probably too many amps or volts. So my only guess is as to why that caused the inverter to error out. You can quickly just reset it so that light turned red. You just switch it off and then power it back on. So it has overcharge protection on the inverter, so it'll kind of just fail safe itself. And then even though this is a 3000 watt inverter, and I'm pretty sure it could at least handle up to like 4000 initial draw, this one's a pretty heavy duty Makita power saw. I bet you if I got one of my cheaper saws it might work, but yeah, this thing must be drawing initial amperage and voltage like that's higher, that equates to higher than 4000 watts. So something, either that, or if I just had this plugged in, nothing else plugged into this power surge, maybe this can handle it. Also, so even though this is a 3000 watt inverter, actually each outlet I think only handles up to 1500 watts. And then maybe each outlet only could handle, and I have both outlets plugged in, so maybe each outlet can only handle up to like 2000 initial draw. So whatever this kicked off exceeded the wattage that it can handle for each outlet.